Hi there. Welcome back to Tuesday's Tips. I'm Greg Kaiser, and in this weekly feature here on YouTube, we are looking into image editing, specifically in Lightroom, but honestly, most of the techniques that I'm using here can be applied to other image editors. And we've spent a lot of time covering global edits, meaning edits to the entire picture, and we've really been kind of diving into the local edits using masks. Which is kind of like layers in Photoshop. Does pretty much the same thing. It just isolates different portions of the image so that you can go in and fine-tune certain aspects within the frame. So we've covered a lot of them, and I'm kind of going in order and jumping around just a little bit. We talked about one of my favorites last week, and that was the linear gradient. There's a lot of things that we can do with that, and there's actually quite a few more things that we can do than I even showed on the tutorial. But just trying to give you a working knowledge of how to use these masks and some of the things that can be done with them. So we're going to go ahead and go into Lightroom, and we're going to check out a picture that I shot a while ago. And this is not my normal subject matter. This is actually a picture that I did of my own car, my fun little hobby car. And I wanted to try to find a situation where I could put it in something where it made sense. And this old filling station that's now a repair shop really fit the bill. And I like the design of the building, and that brings in that decay aspect that I like. We've got this obviously not decayed car out front. We've gone through and done pretty much a global edit, and as you see here, we've got the basic panel, calibration, color mixer, all of these that have the highlight eyeball. Those have all been worked some way or shape or form. I have not used lens blur. That's not something that I've ever messed with and don't really have any intention of messing with. But everything else we've done bits and pieces of. And everything I've done here, I've pretty much covered in other episodes of Tuesday's Tips, but we're going to go ahead and get into the local edits. And what I've done, just for simplicity, is I've removed all the local edits, which there weren't a whole lot, and I wanted to kind of get a different take on this because I looked back in my edits and I really didn't use this mask all that much. In fact, I didn't use it for anything. And honestly, that's my fault. I should have, because this is a fantastic mask to use, and it is probably the most unsung hero with the Lightroom masks. And if we go up here underneath the histogram all the way to the right to the masking button, it'll come up here if you haven't got any other masks involved. We've covered subject, sky, background. We're going to go ahead and hit objects. And I've kind of glossed over this a little bit in the introduction to masks series that I did as a two-part, probably a little over a month ago. But I kind of hit on some of the main parts of objects in that it is very, very useful. And it's kind of the catch-all for everything. Now, what we've gone up to this point, if I was wanting to deal with just the car, I could easily do select subject. If this was a person, I could easily do select person. But there's sometimes is a little bit easier way, because as you see, there's a lot of stuff behind here that might get drug into a mask when you say select subject. So we're going to go in and we did an object mask. And over here on the stack to the right, we have select objects, and there's two modes. One of them is brush select, which is the one that I use most of the time. But there's also this rectangle select. And we're going to try this. And I haven't done this beforehand, so if it does work, then surprise, it works out great. If it doesn't work, then I was kind of hoping it didn't work. But when we have the select rectangle, you just basically put a rectangle around your subject. And let's see what Lightroom detects. And this is one of the AI generated features in Lightroom. It's usually pretty good, and in this situation, it worked just as well had I done a free draw of it. And again, I don't use object selection as much as I really should. And I'm the first to admit that. It's a quick one to do. And Lightroom is getting better with each update as far as how these masks work. So we've got a mask here. There's no sense in doing a whole lot else with it as far as selecting, deselecting. Lightroom did a really good job, especially with just me drawing a rectangle. So we've got a mask done. And remember, I don't like doing like select subject with exposure, because you see how when we do this, it doesn't look quite right unless you're just really just barely scratching the surface of what you can do. I prefer to do a radial there, because then you start getting things around the car that gradually build into whatever exposure adjustment. What I do like doing is adding a little bit of presence, maybe a little saturation, changing contrast, or adjusting shadows just a little bit. So we can bring the shadows up just a tad. We can come down here to the presence. Let's see what clarity does. And clarity on a shiny car is not as effective as on a rusty car, in my opinion. But that doesn't look too bad. And we've got the kind of shadow detail here in the wheel that's coming out because we boosted the shadows. We could go in here, we could do stuff with the tone curve, but honestly, the contrast works for me. If the color is not quite right, we can go in and do some of the color tone curves, and we can add a little bit of red in. We can take a little bit of the red out. And as with everything, it's seasoned to taste. If we go down and we add cyan, we're actually pulling a lot more of the sky color out of the side of the car. And if that's what you want, then great. I didn't want to quite go that far, so I didn't change any of the colors there. But generally speaking, that's what I would do. I'd add a little bit of presence. We might play with the saturation just a little bit, because remember, the eyes are going to go to the brightest part of the scene. They're going to go to the areas of highest contrast, and then they're going to go to areas of saturation. Now, you don't want to do something like this where you way oversaturate. But if the subject doesn't have the right level of saturation, you can boost it here. Because everything is kind of subdued in the background, the car itself might be a little too saturated, so you can bring it down just a tad. Something like that. Okay? So that's one thing that we can do with objects. And of course, you can see up here in the mask, what's in white is what's being adjusted, so you can see that the car is there. Just as a reminder, you can double click on that mask 1 and you can do car. That way, when you look up here and you have a whole list, you can easily see what's going on. So let's do something a little bit different where we can't do the rectangle. We're going to create a new mask, and we're going to go down here, and things are a little bit different than that originating dialog box, but things are in the same order. We've got all of these up here, then we've got object. So we'll do object, and just for conversation's sake, I'm going to do the brush select, and let's just say this support, I want to make it a little bit brighter just to add that little extra dimension. So we're just going to left click and we're going to highlight, and it does not have to be precise. As you saw with the rectangle on the car, I got away with a very blunt interpretation. So we're just going to kind of generally outline that, and you can change the size of that brush with the wheel on your mouse, the bracket keys on your keyboard, the ones that are next to the P. So you see we've got a little bit of bleed over, and I was kind of expecting that. But again, with all these masks, if you go and click on that, you can subtract, and the brush is generally going to be the easiest. And as a reminder, my A brush is set at 30% flow, so it has to build up the effect. The B brush is set for 100% flow. And that's what we want at this point. So I'll go up here and we're just going to subtract the mask where it doesn't need to be. And of course, I'm kind of doing this quickly. We can do auto mask. And there we go. So auto mask helps quite a bit here. And that was my oversight for not doing that. So we'll go back and we will erase that remove. So we're going to add back and just make that a little bit smaller, and we'll add it back right there. Okay, again, not perfect, but it kind of gets the job done. So the mask now, and it's wanting to show there. There we go. That's the adjusted mask that we've done. So we can bring the exposure up just a little bit. Maybe raise the white just a little, just to give that a little bit more presence. Now in the final picture I didn't do that, but this was for the sake of argument. And we'll go up here and we will label this support so we know what it is, because it's really hard to see up here what that little sliver of mask is. That's why I like to rename these things. Now, one thing that I did run into was this Pepsi machine, and ideally it would not have been there. And yes, I could have done content aware delete or the AI infused delete, however you choose to do it, and made this go away completely. But from a creative standpoint, I've got this big mass of red, and it's hard to say that this Miata is big. It's a car that you strap on, you don't actually get into. So it's a small car, but we have a lot of red here, and the blue in the sign and the Pepsi, the vending machine, along with the sky, helps balance that out. So I decided creatively I wanted to leave the Pepsi there. And I needed to get it out of the shadow just a little bit. So we're going to go back and we're going to do select object. And just because we had really good luck with the rectangle draw, I'm going to try that again. And you just kind of get it close. Doesn't have to be perfect. Let Lightroom think about it for a minute. Ponders life. And okay, it did a decent job, but it included part of the pole and it missed the side of the box here. So what we're going to do the space bar within the mask, and you get your magnifying glass. And you're going to zoom in, and then with the space bar still pressed, you can use that hand and you can move this around. Now, just like with every other mask, we can go up here, click on it, add, and we could do a brush, and that may be the easiest, but let's do object. And let's do this brush tool. And again, we can change the size, and we're going to highlight the areas of the vending machine that we want to include. It doesn't have to be precise, but you need to make sure Lightroom is aware of what you want. And let's see how this works. Okay, so there we go. A little bit of feathering there we might have to work out. But let's get rid of this pole. So we're going to subtract brush. And for this, I'm going to leave auto mask off because it's going to try to differentiate between the painted and the bare parts. And to most easily see this, we've got the mask on. We're going to show overlay. And we're just going to run up this pole. And again, I'm doing this kind of clumsily. I'm not really worried about the lines because I've got the edit done on this that I want. So I'm just showing you kind of how this works out. And over here on the side, you see where it kind of bled into the building. If we're removing already, we can go ahead and remove that. Just clean these edges up. And while we're here, let's go ahead and add a brush. B brush, we can do the auto mask, hover back over here, and we're going to go back down this side. So that area that's kind of feathered in, we've now included it. So we've got a decent mask. It's not perfect. It'll take me a few more minutes, but I'm not going to make you sit here and deal with that with me. But you get the idea. But we're going to bring this up out of the shadows just a little bit. Let's go back to the full picture. So space bar, we're still in the mask. And there we go. So we're back to the full picture, and we can kind of get an idea what this is doing. And there. A little bit of boost of shadows, 34 points, and then a little over 1/10 of exposure, and that brings that out. And we can go ahead and do the eyeball. That's where we started. That's where we are. So now this communicates with this sign a lot better. And speaking of the sign, I want to add a little bit more pop here. So we're going to create a new mask, object, and because I'm getting really impressed with this rectangle select, we're going to try it again. Now obviously this does not fit really well into this box, so we're going to see what Lightroom does. And again, I'm impressed. I need to use objects more regularly than I do. And fortunately, one of the things I'm learning about myself doing these tutorials is how useful some of these tools are, and I get stuck in my ways. I'm 50 years old, and I like doing things the way that I started because it's just in my workflow. But for your benefit, I'm expanding my understanding of the tools, and that helps you, but it also helps me because this is a whole lot easier than going in with a brush and getting that taken care of. So what I would like to do here is add a little bit of contrast to this sign. So we're going to go to a brighter area, and you see even the white part of this sign. If you look on the tone curve on the right hand side where that little dot is that's moving, that is showing where on that tone curve that white point is. I want to bring that up just a little bit. I don't want to make it pure white, but I want to add a little pop to it. So we're going to go up to about there. And then we're going to go to this blue, which is there about mid-tone. And I'm going to pull that down. So we're getting some nice contrast. We're getting a nice S-curve in the sign. And of course, now we have introduced more saturation. So we're just going to take this down all the way. It doesn't take saturation away. It removes all the added saturation that you've added with contrast. Anytime you add contrast, you are going to add saturation and change colors slightly. So I like the refine saturation slider to be all the way to the left when I do a tone curve because I don't want to affect the colors, only the luminosity. Now I'm also going to go and hit the clarity just a little bit on this sign. Again, just to give it a little bit of pop. Very, very subtle. And if we go up here and hit the eyeball, you can see where it started and where it is. The white has more oomph to it. Colors haven't changed any, but the sign sticks out a little bit more and it becomes a more important element to the scene. So we've dealt with the sign as an object, we've dealt with this as an object, we've dealt with the car as an object. So let's go back to the car for a minute. And remember, we did this as an object. And this is something I really haven't gotten into, but it's worth doing at this point because we might have been able to select this as a subject and then invert it to a background, but it might have included a bunch of other stuff that we didn't want. But we've got a good object selection here. So we come over here beside car to these three dots, and we're going to go down here and we're going to duplicate and invert mask. So we're going to do this mask that we've already set up based on the object selection. We're going to make another mask and then we're going to invert it. So we'll duplicate and invert, and then it's going to show car inverted. And what just happened? We now have a background mask based off of a mask that we've already done. So now we can take care of everything in the background the way that we might want it to do. So maybe we want to darken it a little bit. But again, that's the same thing. There's that hard line. I would rather do that through a radial. Maybe we can change the highlights. Okay, that doesn't look too bad. Pull the highlights down. It takes a little bit of the presence out of the background. If that's what you want, go for it. We can play with the saturation. We can drop it down just a little bit. We can do all kinds of things. And this isn't necessarily something that I did in the original picture. Again, I'm just showing you some things for conversation. But had I gone in and decided to do a tone curve specifically on the car, I can also do a tone curve in the background if I didn't do it globally. And with this one, I did do a tone curve globally, but I can go and we can pull down the darks just a little bit, give a little bit more contrast, and then we can bring the brights up a little bit. Just give a very, very shallow S-curve. And maybe that's what you're going for. We can also go up here and remember the blue channel. The blue and yellow are opposites, and that's another way to warm or cool a scene. So if I wanted to maybe bring a little bit more warmth into the scene, but not the car, because I didn't want to affect the red, I could pull that down into the yellow, and you see how we've kind of warmed this up a little bit. If I wanted to cool it, push more of the blue in. Again, season to taste. This is your work. This is your edit. Do what you want to do with it. And somewhere probably right around in there, for right now, it looks good to me. And maybe we want to pull a little bit of the clarity out just to soften the background. We've added clarity up here. We can go back and very easily on this drink machine add clarity. Because again, this is non-destructive. We can go back and we can play with each mask until we're happy with what we've got. So I put some of the clarity back in there that I took out of the background. So I've got clarity here, extra clarity here. So there's a lot of things that we can do. Now we're talking about kind of broad stroke things. What about when you get into doing specific things on a car? Well, this is kind of one of those things where it works really well to do the object. Go back up here to the top. We're going to select the freehand brush. And let's just see what we can do about getting a wheel. Now, yes, I could do a radial gradient here, but if you'll notice, we're not exactly oval. I would have to probably go in and do some subtracting and that sort of thing. And while that's not really a problem, let's see if we can do it all in one fell swoop. So we just covered everything because it's got a tire, it's got wheel, it's got the calipers. All these things are going to affect the mask. So I wanted to just highlight everything. And it did a pretty good job. I had added the shadow here. It didn't pick it up. That's in the shadows. I'm not overly concerned. We're going to go back here to the tone curve. And I've got a client who just really does not like the tone curve. And it's one that I really think is a very beneficial one. And this is why, because I can go in here on a lighter part of the wheel where it's picking up some reflection, and I can pull that bright end up, and then I can come over here to the dark side, and I can pull that down, so I'm getting the exact contrast that I want in that wheel. If you need to, hit the space bar, you get the little magnifying glass, and there we go. Okay, get the magnifying glass and we can go in and you can see what's going on with this wheel. And we did this as an object. That's before the mask, that's after the mask. So it's just in what you want to do and how you want to do it. Go back here. Headlights is another thing that I do a lot with. So we're going to go select object. We're still on that free draw. Make this thing kind of small. Do it with the wheel on the mouse or the bracket keys on the keyboard. And we're going to go around this headlight. And let's see, just by doing an outline, it should go ahead and pull that whole headlight. And there we go. Now we can add another object, and this other headlight we can go ahead and highlight as well. Now, what this is going to do is going to allow us to adjust the headlights together. We can do the same thing on this one that we do here, and we can do it all at one time. So I'm going to give a little bit of exposure. I'm going to drop the black point just a little bit to add contrast. I'm going to check my highlights, and there's really nothing clipping, so I'm going to push my highlights up just a little bit in the headlights. Give them a little more contrast, a little bit more presence. There's still nothing really clipping. So let's go down here. Didn't add much clarity to the car in general because it doesn't work as well on a shiny car. But I do like some clarity in the headlights. And if you need to zoom in, do your keyboard spacebar, zoom in, and you can see what's going on here. Happy with it? Zoom back out. Now, we've gone through and done all these masks based on objects. And what if we wanted to do something here in the grill? Same thing works. We're going to do an object. We're still on the brush and not the rectangular one. But I tell you what, let's just see. We're going to learn together because that's what makes this fun. Let's do the rectangular tool around the grill. And let's see if Lightroom can look into my mind, move the cobwebs out of the way, and see what I wanted. Okay. This is a whole lot better than when the objects mask first came out. It really is. Because if I did a rectangle, it really would have messed this up. This is not bad at all. It's got a little bit of bleed over into the red here. So what we're going to do, again, we're trying some things out. We're going to subtract, go down here to color range. Because all I want really is the black part. I don't want the red, so I'm going to put the medicine dropper here on the red. We're going to subtract that. And you see right away it feathers it. Well, we can go up here to the refine, and we can move this to the left, and it's going to add stuff back in, or we can move it to the right, and it's going to reduce. And right there, we've pretty much lost the red. We've got a little bit of feathery look. You can see through the green mask, so it's not 100%, but that's okay because I'm not doing a lot here. We'll bring the shadows up just a little. And again, this is not necessarily how I would do this, but I'm showing some things. And what I did is I clicked up here on the left-hand arrow because I want to see where the black point is. I've raised the shadows, but I want to drop the black point until we just start to get some clipping. And you can see that with the blue, and it doesn't take much. We'll say right about there. And there's just a couple little pixels here and there. So that gives us a true black point in the grill while raising the shadows. Take the eyeball on and off, and you can kind of see what's going on. It's very subtle, but if you want to get a little bit more detail out of these areas, that would be a way to do that. So I'm going to uncheck this, and let's say, okay, now I honestly do not mind this outbuilding being darker because, again, the eyes go to the brighter parts. I don't want something that's bright right here. So the barn itself is good for me. But if I wanted to do some more tweaking with that barn, we'd do the object. And because I'm getting really impressed with this rectangle one here, we're just going to leave it there. And we're going to go around the little outbuilding. And let's see what it does. And survey says, there we go. Again, I'm actually impressed. And this is telling me I need to use this more often. What we can do, we can actually do a reverse curve on this. Means we're going to take the brighter areas and we're going to bring it down just a little bit. We're going to darken those. And we can lighten the dark portions here. It just takes a little bit of the contrast out of the barn. And just by doing that, and again, this is not something I did on the original edit, it's just something I came up with at this point to show you what we can do. But if you take the eyeball and you take that away, you see the contrast there and how that doorway and that roof line kind of draws your attention there. That reverse S-curve, it just softens this just enough. We're still in the right realm of contrast. It's believable. We've got a light area, dark area, but it takes some of that contrast away. And we can go up here and, you know, maybe drop the shadows just a little bit, take some of that lightness out of it. Something about there. And now it's there, but it's not a big distraction. Not a big distraction at all. It's what you want to do and how you want to do it. But we've got all of these masks here. Every one of them is based in object. So that's what I really wanted to get through today, was just showing how beneficial the object mask is. And honestly, it's more beneficial than I've been giving it credit for. And like I said, this is a very underutilized tool, and it's pretty much the mask anything mask. So we're going to go ahead and leave this. Let's see. There we go. I'm going to get this transition thing done at some point, and we'll make it smooth. Video editing is not my strong suit, and you know, I don't know if it ever will be. I like to do these in just one take, and it is what it is. I'm confident in my ability to get through the information. It's just there might be a little stumble here and there, especially when it comes time to doing the buttons. But I really want to just drive home the fact that the Select Object mask in Lightroom has come a long way since it was added. It was kind of cumbersome, and it wasn't always the easiest thing to work with, but it would work when other things wouldn't. And now it's gotten really, really good. And doing that rectangle, that's an easy way of just put it roughly around your object and it'll do the rest. If it's something more technical, a little bit more detailed, then that's when you use that brush one. And it's very good. And you don't have to do every part of the object. Go around and get an outline. As we did with the car itself, we just did an outline. It selected the whole car. Everything was great. With the wheel, I went ahead and got everything, because there's a lot of different things that might have messed Lightroom up. And that just kind of comes from experience and knowing which to do and what may or may not work. And again, there are always improvements being made that makes this a more usable tool. But the main thing to remember is the Select Object is kind of the select anything. If nothing else works, that will, and that may be quicker to be your go-to mask, is Select Object, either the rectangle or brush tool. If you'd like to delve into this further with me, I do offer mentorships, and I'm happy to talk with you. We can do it virtually. We can do it in person if you happen to be in the foothills of North Carolina. That's where I'm located. Anywhere around there, I'm happy to do some mentorship in person with you, whether that's, you know, going out and capturing an image with your camera, you know, learning how to get permission to go places. We can also do image editing here in the studio, or I can go to your location on your machine and help you with that. When it comes to image editing, it's real easy to do that virtually, and most of my image editing clients are done and handled virtually, and got them in several different states all across the U.S., so that's not a problem at all to do. I'm happy to work with you however I can to get you to achieve your dreams and be able to be the photographer that you want to be. And I'm not trying to teach you to be a photographer like me. It's just I want to take the time and listen to you and find out how you want your pictures to look, and then we go from there to get your vision. So that brings us to the close of yet another Tuesday's Tips, and we're moving right along. And we're going to start getting into some of the other masks here in the coming weeks. And again, if there are any questions, anything that's driving you crazy with Lightroom, let me know. If there's something that you'd like me to go further into, let me know. I always enjoy the suggestions. Last week we did a viewer suggested video, and I think that turned out really great. So I'm always open for inspiration on what to talk about. But in lieu of that, we're going to keep going through these local masks and how we can use them and how the different editing tools can work within those masks. So until next week, happy shooting, happy editing. Let me know if there's something I can do mentorship-wise. There'll be a link in the description. And other than that, we'll see you back here again next week. Thank you so much.